Welcome, everyone, to Whimsy Woven Stories. Here, we explore gripping tales of real-life twists. Join our storytelling community. My name is Dustin. I am a 35-year-old man. I was married to Kathy, who was 32 when we got divorced. I work as an engineer at a local company and make a decent amount of money every month. We have a 6-year-old son, Ron. I met my wife through a common friend who introduced us. We kept in touch and later started dating. After dating for about 3 years, we decided to get married. We had our honeymoon in Phuket, Thailand. At our honeymoon, my wife was staring at all the Asian men and asked me, "These guys are smaller than an average white man. They must be small between the legs, right?" I took that as a silly question and laughed it out. Kathy was always the one into fitness. She used to regularly visit the gym and tries to stay fit. When Kathy was pregnant, I took extra care for her. I used to cook, at times feed her in bed. I tried my best to pamper her during her pregnancy, as my mother told me that I need to keep her happy for the baby to be a bright one. Once Ron was born, I knew it was time for me to start pushing myself at work, as now I needed a ton of money. Once Ron was 5-year-old, Kathy started to go to the gym as she wanted to lose the fat she gained during her pregnancy. This is where my life took turn for the worst. In 2 months, Kathy had lost almost 20 pounds, and I was shocked at her transformation. I used to see her get better every day, but did not realize the amount of weight that she lost was that high. I asked her, what is the secret for the weight loss? She explained that she was not training martial arts, and that helped her lose weight. I was inspired and decided to go back to my old gym that I used to train at. I started training, and as a few months, I too was getting physically better, but I was not losing weight like my wife. One day I asked my wife if I can come train with her trainer and lose some weight. She was a bit taken aback and stated that the batch was full and they are not taking any more trainees. I was a bit shocked and brushed it off and did not put a lot of thought at it. A few days later, I was leaving for home when the front desk lady asked me to wait. She told me that some guy came looking for me. I asked if that guy left a message. She said no. I asked how did he look like. She said that it was an Asian guy with a tattoo on his neck. I brushed it off as I did not know any such guy. A day later, my wife asked me if I would like to go watch a Muay Thai match. She said that she has front row pass. I was surprised and asked how did she get front row pass to a Muay Thai event. She stated that her trainer is competing. I said yes, as it was an exciting event and I have never seen a Muay Thai match up close. So here we were at the event, and after 3 fights, it was her trainer's turn. It was a 150-pound fight. The fighters stepped in the ring, and I noticed that both fighters had tattoos on their neck. I laughed at the coincidence, and that someone came to my office with that tattoo was funny. So the bell rang, and Kathy's trainer knocked out the opponent within 15 seconds. The fight was one-sided, and the winner was celebrating. I excused for a quick pee. I came back, and from a distance, I saw my wife was hugging that fighter. I was angry, and at the same time I was thinking maybe it is because that the guy is her trainer. Things like that happens among team members. While going home, I asked my wife, why did she hug the guy? She stated that it was her trainer and it was just a small hug. Not that I am sleeping with. She was angry and did not speak to me that night. At home, she stated that I ruined her mood and she was happy that her trainer won, but I ruined that as well. I apologized and tried to sort the situation. That night, I woke up and did not find my wife in my bed. I started to look for her, and I saw her in the kitchen. She had her phone on the kitchen table and was standing naked. She was on a video call with someone. I heard her say, "This is your prize for today." I walked up to the phone, picked it up, and saw that she was making a video and had not sent to anyone. Before I could check it, she said that she was making that for me. Since we had a fight, she wanted to make it up to me. I walked up to her and turned her on the kitchen table and made sure it was one of the best she ever had. Once I was done, she collapsed on the floor and was panting hard. She said we should do this more often. I was foolish to believe her that night. Next morning, I woke up happy and went to the gym to train. I trained hard that day. It was cold, so I was wearing a beanie cap and had a hood over my head. Once I was done, I walked out of the gym to go home. As I approached my car, I noticed a man walking towards me. He appeared to be about 170 centimeters tall, and as he got closer, I realized that he was Kathy's trainer. With a confident and almost unsettling demeanor, he stopped in front of me, looked me straight in the eye, and said something that caught me completely off guard. I need to tell you something, he began with a smug grin. I'm in love with your wife. Every single day, twice a day, I make love to her. I sent her home carrying my seed, and I want you to know that from now on, you are to leave her alone. Don't touch her. She's mine now. His words were sharp and deliberate, intended to provoke me, and the intensity of his gaze made it clear that he believed every word he said. It was as though he wanted to shatter my world right then and there. I was left speechless, utterly shocked by his words. My face must have shown my confusion and disbelief because, just then, two of my training partners arrived, noticing something was off. They asked what was going on, but before I could respond, the guy started throwing insults and threats my way. He demanded that I walk away from my wife, or he'd beat me up right then and there. I was still in shock, trying to process everything he was saying. I had no idea what he was talking about, or why he was so intent on confronting me like this. My training partners were closing in, ready to step in, but I gestured for them to hold back. I looked the guy in the eye and told him he needed to be clear about what he was saying and asked if he was sure he wanted to deal with me. With a cold, confident voice, he repeated, "Kathy is my love. I want her for myself." Then, with a dramatic flair, he took off his jacket, throwing it to the side, and squared up for a fight. He positioned himself directly in front of me. Hands raised, fists clenched, his footwork quick and controlled like someone who knew how to handle himself in a fight. At that moment, it was a clear choice, fight or flight. I felt the adrenaline surge, and without saying a word, I calmly took off my cap. The guy froze for a second, his eyes drawn to my cauliflower ears, a badge of my years of combat training. Anyone familiar with fighting would understand that this wasn't my first time facing a challenge, but despite that warning, he shook his head and raised his fists again, ready to escalate things. You see, I'm a former high school wrestler standing 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighing almost 260 pounds. Here's this guy, probably no more than 150 pounds, threatening me, telling me he's going to beat me up. The absurdity of it all only added to the tension, but it was clear he wasn't backing down. So I decided to match his energy. I calmly took off my jacket and got ready, preparing myself for whatever was about to come next. This wasn't going to end with words. As soon as I took off my jacket and squared up, he wasted no time. He lunged forward and threw a punch, aiming right for my face. The hit landed, slicing open my eyebrow, and almost instantly, I felt the warm trickle of blood running down my face. It stung, but it wasn't the pain that got me. It was the audacity of this guy. He stood there, barely catching his breath, and with a cocky grin, he asked, "You want more?" Before he could even finish his sentence, I had already moved. Years of wrestling instinct kicked in, and I shot for a double-leg takedown. I wrapped his legs and lifted him clean off the ground. He must have been at least 6 feet in the air before he knew what was happening. There's a sinking feeling you get when you're picked up like that, helpless, with the ground rapidly coming up to meet you. And when he hit, the impact was brutal. His body slammed into the pavement with a thud, and the sound of his breath getting knocked out of his lungs was unmistakable. He gasped, wide-eyed, like he was drowning in airless space. But I wasn't done. I could see the fear in his eyes as he struggled to regain his composure, but I gave him no time. I hoisted him back up, this time driving him down onto the hood of his own car. The sound of metal buckling beneath his body echoed through the street as the car's bonnet crumpled under the force. The impact left a deep dent, and I could hear the groaning of twisted metal as his body lay sprawled across it. For a second, I thought he might stay down, but the rage in me wasn't satisfied yet. I grabbed him again, lifted him effortlessly like a rag doll, and slammed him back down, this time even harder. The car hood caved in further, and with that final crash, he was done. His body was limp, crumpled like a piece of discarded paper, lying there motionless as the reality of what had just happened set in. He had come at me with all that bravado, but now the fight was drained out of him. Blood still dripped from my face. I stood over him, adrenaline pumping through my veins, as he lay there broken, defeated, and realizing just how big a mistake he had made. After the fight, my friends came up to me, concerned but also supportive. They told me they had seen everything and would back me up if that guy tried to file a complaint. One of them had even recorded the whole thing on video, capturing the moment when the arrogant trainer got the beating of his life. With evidence on my side, I knew I had nothing to worry about, but deep down, I could sense that the day wasn't over yet. There were more secrets waiting to surface, ones that might be even more shocking than what had just unfolded. When I got home, I felt the weight of everything hanging over me. I poured myself a glass of water, letting the cool liquid settle me. My phone buzzed, and it was my friend sending over the video of the fight. I watched it briefly, seeing the trainer's arrogance crumble as he hit the ground again, and knew I had to confront Kathy with this. I found her in the house, looking relaxed and completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I asked her to sit down with me, trying to keep my composure. I smiled slightly and said, "I got something to show you." I handed her my phone and hit play. At first, she smiled back, probably thinking it was just something casual or funny, but as the video played, the look on her face changed. Her smile slowly faded, replaced by shock and horror as she realized what she was watching. She saw the fight, the brutal takedown, the smashed car, and the trainer lying there like a broken doll. The reality of the situation dawned on her as she watched in stunned silence. Her eyes met mine, and I could see the panic behind them, as if she knew there was no way to explain away what had just unfolded. As soon as the video ended, Kathy's reaction was immediate. Tears streamed down her face, and she lashed out at me, shouting, "Why did you beat him up?" Her anger and hurt were palpable, but I wasn't going to let that deflect what needed to be addressed. I looked her dead in the eye and asked the question that had been burning inside me ever since the fight. "Why did you sleep with him?" The shock in her expression told me everything. She hadn't expected me to know. The room went dead silent for a moment as she struggled to find words. I pressed further, repeating exactly what her affair partner had said to me earlier. "He told me he loves you, that he sleeps with you every day, twice, and sends you home carrying his seed." At that moment, her tears turned to sobs, and she broke down, barely able to get her words out. "I was just curious," she cried. My voice rose, filled with frustration and betrayal. "Curious? For what?" She wiped her eyes, struggling to explain. "Ever since I started training with AP, I was, curious. Curious if Asian men are good in bed." Her confession hit me like a gut punch. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She continued, her words stumbling out between sobs. "It started with just small flirting at first. One day during training, I accidentally kicked AP in the groin. I apologized, of course, and after the session, I went to his office to say sorry again. That's when things escalated. He flirted with me and even showed me where I had kicked him." Her face was a mess of tears, and her voice quivered as she tried to explain what happened next. "I don't know what came over me," she whispered. "One moment, I was apologizing, and the next, we were having sex. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." The room felt heavy with the weight of her confession. I stood there, my mind spinning, trying to comprehend how things had spiraled so far out of control. The betrayal, the lies, the complete absurdity of it all. It was too much to take in at once. Kathy's confession wasn't over. Through her tears, she admitted that this affair had been going on ever since the first time. She said she loved me, and that I was her only real love. Desperately, she tried to rationalize what had happened, insisting that it was just casual sex, a physical fling with some random guy. She begged me not to think too much about it, saying that since there was no emotional attachment, just lust, it could be overlooked. I stood there silent. Her words washed over me, but they didn't ease the pain. She was trying to make it sound like this was just a meaningless mistake, something that could be swept under the rug. But the weight of her betrayal, the deliberate choices she made, couldn't be brushed aside so easily. My mind raced, filled with anger, confusion, and disbelief. Without saying a word, I grabbed my phone and dialed her mother. Kathy watched, her eyes widening in disbelief. But she didn't try to stop me. When her mother picked up, I laid it all out, telling her everything. About the affair, the lies, and the betrayal. I could hear her mother's breath catch on the other end of the line as she started crying. Kathy exploded in anger. "Why did you tell my mother?" Her voice was shrill, full of rage and disbelief, but I stayed calm. I looked her in the eyes and with a cold, steady voice said, "Just think of it as me telling her a casual story." That response struck her deeply, almost as if she realized the weight of her own hypocrisy in that moment. Her rage escalated, filling the room with her screaming, but I was strangely calm. It was as if a dam had broken inside me, and all the emotion I had built up was gone. I sat down, and as she kept yelling, I felt a strange silence. I could see her mouth moving, her gestures animated, but I couldn't hear a word. It was as if the world had muted around me. I just watched her, feeling detached, like I was no longer part of the chaos unraveling in front of me. After what felt like an eternity, but was only a few seconds, I snapped back into reality. The sound of her voice came flooding back in, but by then, I had already made my decision. I looked her in the eyes, still calm, and said, "Get out, talk to a lawyer, and start the negotiations." My words hung in the air, final and cold. There was no more room for discussion, no more rationalizing, no more tears. She had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, and now there was only one path forward. I stood by my decision, knowing that this chapter of my life had come to an end. Kathy fell to her knees, pleading now. "Think of our son." She begged through her tears. "You'll ruin his life if we get divorced." I couldn't help but smile bitterly at her words. "That's a very valid point," I said calmly. "I wonder if you thought about our son while you were screwing that fighter." My voice was sharp, cutting through the tension. "I hope the sex was good, and I hope you treasure every memory of every climax you had with him, because soon enough, I'll be sending a formal complaint to his gym. He'll be jobless, and maybe he'll crawl back to Thailand. Or better yet, if he loves you so much, he can take you with him." The weight of my words hit her like a punch. She sobbed harder, but I was done. "Now pack your bags and get out of my house." I didn't wait for her response. I just turned and walked away, feeling an eerie calm settle over me. As I headed toward the door, I added, "Don't wake our son. Be gone by the time I get back." With that, I left the house, not looking back at her tear-streaked face. Once outside, I called her mother again and told her everything, explaining the situation in full. "I'll be divorcing your daughter," I said, making my decision clear. There was no turning back from here. When I returned home, I saw Kathy leaving with her mother. The weight of everything hit me as I walked inside, the house now eerily quiet. I checked on my son, still peacefully asleep, completely unaware of the storm brewing around him. My heart sank. The reality of what this would mean for him, the trauma of a broken home, the uncertainty of the future, washed over me like a tidal wave. I couldn't hold back the emotion any longer. I collapsed onto the floor near his bed, curling up as tears silently streamed down my face. I cried for him, for the life we once had, and for everything that had been shattered. The next morning, I gathered myself and met with the lawyer. I laid out everything, explaining the situation in detail and sharing the video of the fight. He watched, his expression shifting between disbelief and sympathy. "This is quite something," he said, clearly surprised at how things had unfolded. But he was professional and focused. He assured me that he would do everything in his power to help secure custody of my son, knowing how much this mattered to me. Before I left, he advised me to send a formal complaint to the gym where Kathy had trained, detailing the affair and what had happened. It was another step toward closing this painful chapter and holding those involved accountable. I contacted the gym via email, and in time, they decided to fire that AP. As a result, he also lost his fight contracts with the promotions he was signed to. The video of me overpowering him spread quickly in underground circles, gaining quite a bit of attention. Since then, I haven't spoken to Kathy at all. The court awarded her custody of our child, which broke my heart. On top of that, I had to hand over the house to her as part of the alimony settlement. Now, I'm also paying monthly child support. Kathy's meddling completely turned my life upside down, emotionally and financially. Thanks for listening. Share your opinion in comment section, and also do like and subscribe to the channel.